Hello everybody, thank you for joining us on our 11th live webinar. My name is Jose Merchan. I'll be guiding us through this webinar today. This is our 11th webinar and we are going to talk about our extension packages for widgets and how you can extend and incorporate all of your widgets inside your low-code solution with Blazedpath. So in our previous webinars, we've been checking from the connection and creation of your Blazedpath account, the download, and we've been seeing a lot of features on how to create your application and how to make your development times much more times faster. Today we are going to go a not so low code. We are going to go a little bit deeper inside the source code, because that's one of the requirements to extend and incorporate other frontends, other frameworks than the Blazedpath ones, and that requires a little bit of tinkering. And if you want to use other frameworks, you of course can, but it requires a little bit of work. Otherwise, you can continue to construct the scalable enterprise-grade applications with no problem with the tools out of the box. Just as a reminder, before we start, there's 5,000 cloud credits free for anyone who has registered for today's webinar and open their Blazedpath cloud account within the next 24 hours. And just as a reminder, those cloud credits are used when you are building and deploying the final deploy of your project onto the cloud or your in-house servers. Before we get started, just remember to write any questions. We are going to try to answer them in the Q&A section. If I see them on the spot, I'll try to answer them then, but otherwise just feel free to ask them, and don't worry about me missing the question. There's people in the background and they will take note of the question so we can answer them later. So we are going to start. We're going to move over to the table of contents. Just remember, if you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel, it helps us grow and reach more people. So yeah, let me switch over to the table of contents. These are the things we are going to see today. We're going to make a brief explanation on what's basically the extensibility for frontends mean, what's possible, and basically we're going to answer a very common question we have. This entire webinar has been actually the result of a question that we get very often. That means basically that the enterprise or the people are familiar with a certain kind of frameworks. They like the widgets that maybe Angular or React has, and they want to keep using them because they are so used to customize them to their tastes and their needs. So basically this webinar is to show them how you can actually do that, and well, we're going to go through a couple of examples. And yeah, of course, then we are going to create an extension. We are going to add the widgets, the icons. We're going to generate the code, and we'll show you the end result. So a basic explanation is basically we are going to visit the extensibility module again today. On previous webinars, we touched on the functions side of the extensions. Today we're going to talk on the other side, which is the widget extensions. Just remember, you can add on the extensions, you can add npm.js libraries, so you can have access to everything that's written in those repositories. And of course, you can also do what we're going to do today, which is the widget side, basically the front-end side. We are going to be basically when you're building pages and you see the layout tab. We've seen this on many previous webinars. When you're building a page, you have two tabs, a design tab on the left and the logic tab on the right. Basically, there's a big collection of different widgets that are available that may or may not be enough for your specific needs. Even though most of the functionalities should be covered by what's available out of the box, you may want to use your own widgets, or you may be already used to customize them to your needs. It's very common for developers that are familiar with a certain framework and the widgets they build with that particular framework. So for example, if you are used to Angular and you want to use the widgets that are built on Angular, you may want to continue using them for your systems. Today we are going to see an example of the React framework. For this example, basically can work for any other framework. We're going to also see an example of a complex widget, so that you can see what's your on your final project can end up being very sleek looking. So the reason all of these frameworks can work in Blazedpath is because the suite gives you basically optional access to the program in JavaScript, so you can add as many libraries as you want, and you can also have access to the DOM and render anything you want in there. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and start creating the extension. Let me switch over to the development side. So you may have seen this the Blazedpath suite many times. Our solution for today is going to be very, very simple. We have just a web application. We are only trying to do rendering on the front end. We don't care about microservices or databases today. So all we have today to work with is a web application. I'm going to use a little bit of zoom here so you can see it better. So if I go back to the Explorer, so this is Explorer, this is where you would usually start developing on each different system you have. And I am going to open one of the pages for the UI designer. So this is the designer you would usually use to start developing a page. And the way you start creating a page on the design is just using drag and drop of this big list of widgets that we have out of the box. And you can just drag and drop it in here. So if you drag and drop the widget, you can then start configuring the widget and start working on the customization of the behavior. So just let's delete everything extra we have in here. So the example we're going to see today is actually, let me pull it up on a URL. So we are going to be using this React example. So basically we are going to be using the 1 minute add React example. This is like the first example React gives you to try their framework. The reason we are using this is because it's standalone and it doesn't require much work, and it's perfect for a 15-minute example online to show you first what this example does on itself, by itself, as intended by React, and then how we can get it inside Blazedpath and make it available for everyone. So I'm just going to keep the Blazedpath out of the equation for now. And now I am going to download this example. So basically you download the example files, and whenever you open this file, you will find, if I come back to a text editor, you will find two files. So this is the folder I'm working on. Let me just delete this one so that we don't get messy. So whenever you open that particular example, you will see these two files. We have one file that's basically an HTML, and we have a JavaScript file. I'm going to quickly go through all of these stages. Basically, whenever you come on this example right here, you will see that you have a lot of steps. You have steps 1, talking about the DOM, step 2, talking about the script tags. So we're going to talk about those steps, what they mean, and how we use all those examples in order to start our Blazedpath example. Blazedpath integration. So in here you see a couple of tags. The first tag we see in the page we're working on, this is again an HTML file. Quickly check, yeah. So this is an HTML file. We are going to be working or rendering inside of this div tag, and the way this example handles the div tag is by using the ID on the div tag. So it's going to build something and then look for this ID, so you can then render your final widget inside this div tag. To do that, it uses the framework. The framework is included in these two lines, line 18 and 19, and basically these script cross origin tags are basically telling the page that they need to grab all of the framework that's in this particular URL address included in the page, and then execute whatever is in the other file. So the final tag in this page is the line 22, which is basically, it's including as well the other file that comes in this example, which is just a JavaScript file with some instructions. So we're going to go to that JavaScript, and we're just going to glance a little bit of in this example. The reason I'm going to quickly explain it is so that whatever I end up doing in Blazedpath has a little bit of more sense, and it's not just copy and pasting code. So in this example, we have line 3, we have just a create element tag. We are basically initializing an object, or basically assigning an object to a variable that I then can use in some other place to basically create other elements using the React framework. So basically this React tag in here, it's assuming that the React framework is somewhere in the page, which of course is, because the script cross origin tags are including it in the page. So it's basically instancing this object again. Line 5 through 22 is the definition of the widget that I am going to be including in this example. Doesn't matter what it really does right now. It's just creating the object, extending some other object of the React framework, and then on line 24 it's making a search for the ID tag with the ID like button container. This is kind of important because in Blazedpath the ID is not going to be called like this, so we're going to change this to a variable name. And then finally on line 25 we are actually rendering using the React DOM section of the framework to render this class we defined in this line 5 to 22 into the DOM container we searched for in line 24. So that's basically it. I'm just going to show you quickly how this example works. So I'm just going to copy the full path of the file, pull up the example, enter, and you can see that this is the add reacting 1 minute example. This is the widget, the like widget. So if you click on the like, it changes from one button to just a plain text. It's just a widget. It's basically proving that it works. And if you follow the examples on the page, it's going to show you why this worked, which is basically the explanation we just did. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start including this widget in Blazedpath. So I'm going to go back to Blazedpath. I'm going to pull it down. The work on widgets has to be done in extensions. For that, we have to come out of the solution and go in the same workspace and create a new extension. So I'm going to go to the workspace and create a new extension, which I am going to call React Widgets. And basically these names are usually typed in Pascal, just in case you need to know that. In here I have to create a couple of things. The first thing I want to create is the actual widget. Then I'm going to add an icon. Then I'm going to generate the full set of wrapping code to actually include the actual widget. and then I am going to show you how this example works. So right click, new widget. This new widget is going to be called widget 1 minute like example. Click on OK. So there's a couple of fields you have to complete in here. There's a remarks field, which is just a description. So, this can be used later in documentation. So this is going to be called, this is the example of the 1 minute React framework inclusion. Then I have to add an icon, and then I have 3 sets of fields, which is an attributes, methods, and events. These three fields are basically interactions that this widget needs or can have with other Blazedpath elements. So the attributes are whenever you click on the widget, when you are already designing on a page, you can see on the right, you will see a details section, which you can add attributes, and you can set up combo boxes, you can set up just plain text information that you can then use to initialize the widget. It's things you can configure on each different page, but maybe the same widget used in different pages has different configurations, and that's what attributes are for. We're going to see example of these 3 elements done in Blazedpath, so you can see what I am actually talking about. But because I have to jump over to the other side, I'm just going to talk about this now and then show it later. The methods are subscriptions to blockies. So whenever you configure the behavior of a widget, you may want to use the blocky language to maybe assign a value, refresh the widget, or do whatever. So those methods that are used in Blocky, Blazedpath uses blockies to customize behavior. And if you want your widget to be subscribed to a certain blocky, you have to add it in methods. And events are what you might expect of an event of a widget in a framework. You can add things like on click, on load, on mouse over, all of those events that are common in widget development, you can add them here. So I'm just going to add first an icon for this widget so I can see the difference in icons whenever I'm developing in Blazedpath. And this is going to be 1 minute example.svg. So basically this is a vectorized file, Pascal. 1 minute example. Did I write? Oh, that's a widget. That's my bad. This is actually a file, not a widget. So 1 minute example.svg. I was trying to use a dot in just the name. So now I'm going to copy and paste. This is basically an SVG file that I pulled from the React framework. It's just a plain text that you can edit, and you have the preview on the right. Just a normal Blazedpath tool to see what you're working on with files. And this 1 minute example, I'm going to type this value here. So 1 minute example. So this widget is going to use that 1 minute example icon whenever you're developing on in your solution. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that file. I have everything I need for this widget to work right now. So what I need to do is first generate the wrapping code, which I can do with right click, generate code. And if you see here under React widget, it's going to generate a folder with a JavaScript file, which is basically the code for the generation of all of the of your widget. So basically, you might have already seen these methods in some other frameworks. We have config renders. You may be familiar with problems in rendering where you're trying to render something on a missing DOM container. Basically, Blazedpath in this render file, you don't have to do any of those checks. This render method assures you that whatever you're trying to find in the DOM basically exists, and so whenever you are using the ID of the div itself, it's going to basically be able to render, because you're not going to have that kind of a problem. So let me pull up a chart to show you how the life cycle works. As you can already tell, if you worked in frontends in the past, they can be kind of cryptic. And so basically this is the chart of the life cycle of a widget. First it goes through the config, which is basically the constructor. Then it goes to render. The render launches the main init function that's found in the Blazedpath suite. And then it renders its children, and if you of course close the page, it's going to destroy the DOM container. So just so you know, you are never going to find the DOM existing in the config, but you are always going to be finding it in the render. So anything you are going to do to actually write in the DOM, it's going to be done in the render. So basically what I want to do right now is actually three things. I need to grab all of the framework for React, add it in Blazedpath, and then add the instructions of the render in the render section of the widget. So I'm going to go back to my text editor, and I'm going to grab these two URLs. So I'm going to copy and paste it, come back to the browser, paste it, and basically these URL files contain the framework for React. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. Copy, go back to Blazedpath, add a file. This one is going to be called reactbase.js, and I'm going to copy the contents in there. As for the other file, this is the React DOM section, just fetched, copy, sometimes takes a while, it's a big file, copy and add it here. So this one is going to be react dom.js. Paste it here. And now that basically includes the React framework in Blazedpath whenever you are using the widget. And now I have to give my widget, which is basically this code here, the instructions to render in the div I get from the Blazedpath framework. So I'm going to be working in this section here, which is basically the render section. So coming back here, check on all of this whole example. And the only thing I have to do with this example is to change this ID. For the query selector, I can also use the get element by ID of the DOM, which is arguably faster. So I'm just going to copy and paste everything. Copy it on the render. Just ident it so it looks better. And in here, I could use the same query selector and go plus ID, so this will concatenate both strings, and the query selector will be able to find the div tag with that particular query select. Or you can just go, I'm just going to leave that up for a second so you can copy it for your examples. And you can also go get element by ID and just use the plain ID to actually get the ID of the div, so you can get the actual DOM container. And of course the last line is going to be rendering the result on the DOM container, and it's passing it to the React DOM framework so it can render the like button which was declared here. So that's basically all of the example. It's very quick to actually create. So we are going to go back to my solution. Basically, what I want to do right now is to execute the solution using this widget on the welcome page of the solution, so you can actually see how this widget works in comparison to the actual React example. So just close the other ones. Give it a second to initialize. So I'm going to go back to my welcome screen, and here in home, if I look through the widgets and I start typing React, where is it? Widget 1 minute. So this is my 1 minute like example. Basically, that's already done. Basically, if I click on run, I am going to widget 1 is not defined. Okay, this and some other name. Just give me a second. Just going to start again the CMP home. Previous test might have a little bit of what has done. There we go. So if I come back to 1 minute example and I click back on run, it seems that trying things many times with different names resulted in a problem. So just open it again on the local host, and you can see Blazedpath, the Blazedpath suite with all of their different menu entries that I already had, and we can see the like widget, which if you click, it gives you the same behavior that we had with with the base example. So as you can see, including the React with this particular widget was very fast. Doesn't really take a lot to include a widget like this. It may take you a little while to get other widgets to work that maybe have more connectivity with other elements of your page. But once you're done, you have to be done with that just once. And once you're done, you subscribe to all of the blockies. You're basically done with that, with the widget development, and you can keep on using all of the good low-code tools to jumpstart your development. So I wanted to show another example of basically a calendar, which is kind of a complex. So we included a calendar called TUI, which has basically an MIT license. Basically, this calendar has a lot of rich functionality. It looks very good, and we included it in Blazedpath. So I'm going to run this solution and show you how this calendar looks. So you can see that it's not really to use with simple widgets. It basically supports very complex behavior. So go to the menu, open the calendar, and you can see this calendar, which if you use Microsoft Teams, you may recognize this calendar, which I suspect they are using at Microsoft. So yeah, there's a lot of functionality you can go through in Blazedpath to include anything you want, really. So that's pretty much our whole examples. The only thing I'm left to show is when I talked on different functionality. So I have another custom widget here, which I called my widget. And as we discussed previously, whenever you add attributes on those three elements of the when you're creating widgets, the attributes will be seen here. So if, for example, I think the calendar has attributes. So this calendar has different attributes. I have default views. These three options are basically added as attributes. We can define that in here in the details section, and then you can use other settings for other sections of the page if you want to. So you can use different instances of the widget. As to the subscription of blockies, I want to show that using this widget called my widget. If you go to the logic tab, basically, if you haven't seen this this section in previous webinars, this is where we define the logic of our pages. We use a blocky style of programming with an expression engine to evaluate conditions, and basically we have a lot of blocky, which are basically instructions, which kind of resemble to statements in other programming languages. So you have things like set value, you have ifs, and I'm actually going to show you four different blockies. So we have set value, get value, and refresh. So basically this blocky is this widget is subscribed to these three blockies, and I want to show some other blocky to show the difference. So these three blockies basically require you to indicate what this instruction is, who is this instruction intended for. So I want to set value to an icon or a text box or my custom widget. So I have to select from the list where are the widgets I want to reference in this blocky, so I can select from the drop-down list. So get value, it's also subscribed. The refresh is also subscribed, but the add record, if I click on the widget list in here, I'm not going to see it. So basically, if you want your blocky to subscribe to any of those different instructions, you have to actually do it from the methods in the widget extension section. So as for the events, you can find them in events. If you right click, you will see a lot of main events. So they are basically referring to the whole page. And then you have events that are specific to your widget. This particular widget has already one event called webinar event. So you're not going to see it again. But if you delete it from here, if you remove it, and you go back to my widget, you're going to see your custom event ready to be used. And the way this looks on the counterpart, which is the configuration section, if I go to my custom widget and I open the widget, you can see the three different subscriptions to the blockies I just showed. You can see that the add records is not here, and this is the event that I actually used in order to set a custom event. So yeah, that's basically all of the presentation for today. Yes, as you can see, customizing a widget is very easy to do at first. Of course, this is all optional. You can choose to work with the out-of-the-box widgets, which will probably cover more than 90% of the functionality of your enterprise-grade applications. But if you are just used to working with a certain framework, you can just include it and keep working on Blazedpath with your custom framework. So I'm going to jump over to Q&A and see if there are some questions. Let me delete this one. There you go. So I see from Narendra, how can I get those 5,000 free cloud credits? Do I have to do anything? Narendra, those 5,000 cloud credits are if you subscribe to the Blazedpath cloud account. You actually have to activate the cloud account within the next 24 hours and subscribe to the webinar, which the link should be down in the description. You don't have to do anything else other than that. Just make sure you activate your account within the next 24 hours and subscribe to for today's webinar. We're going to leave the link up for a couple of more hours, so you have time to do so. So yeah, you don't have to do anything else other than that. It's going to be accredited into your account by the next 24 hours. From Jennifer, hi, I have already worked with a couple of widgets in Angular. Can I use /add them in my frontend extension? Yes, this also works for Angular. We can do a webinar specific on Angular some other time, But yeah, you can basically add anything that's based on JavaScript or Node.js. You can probably add it. We have had success with 5 different frameworks until now, and they all work just fine. Sometimes get a little bit of time to customize the behavior if the widget itself is super complex. Just because you need to tie all the functionality to work with other elements of Blazedpath. And once we are done with that, you can just reuse it as many times as you want, and you don't have to worry about the so-called plumbing code. So yeah, that's all of the questions I have. Thank you everybody for coming. And don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe on your way out. And I'll see you guys on the next webinar. Bye bye.